it has to be okay that your boundaries are important, even though they don't make sense to everyone else. Because if you think about it, especially if you're in this position, it's often that you'll put your needs as a lesser than the other person. Whereas if that person decided you weren't the great person in their lives, they could make that decision and they could cut you out.
Hey guys, welcome to our SoulFam Podcast, where I interview space holders from all over the world. I am Karolina, and I am the Connection Catalyst. I help spiritual entrepreneurs experience deeper connection with themselves, with others, and with the universe. Today on the show, we have Chelsea Jane, the Unconditioned Self. Welcome to the show, Chelsea. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored to be to be connecting like this. It's not always easy to find really connected souls like you, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I would really love to talk about this theme of unconditioned self, because just so you know, guys, before we started the call, I was like, Chelsea, how would you like to be described as? Like, who are you? And we had this whole talk about like how you need to define yourself in this world, but you actually are not something that you can define ever, right? Because there is so much to us that we cannot even know some parts of us, right? So I would love to talk about what this unconditioned self means to you, and also what are kind of like inspirations in your life, the things that you do in life that could be maybe not only the labeled identities of yours, but just some sparks of things and activities and things that you'd like to share with the world.
Oh gosh, isn't that a huge topic? It's probably why I had such a connection when you asked me that question to like, how the heck do you define who I am? And I think it came, especially in terms of being a coach or having any kind of background. Mine is in psychology and spirituality and all of that. I tried on a few different labels, but I could never stick with one. And I realized it was because I was trying to find it felt like that it was putting me in a box. And I think when I discovered all of these sort of beautiful things and hard things to learn about the way that we are conditioned in our lives, I think I kind of realized that I was needing that to not be the case. I needed to find a way to sort of not define, so that I could feel that freedom of being whoever I wanted to be in any given moment. And I think there's so many expectations from people, from society, from myself, from all the things that have happened, that it's really hard to sort of be all conclusive about it when we have the ability to be absolutely anything. And we can choose that. And I think the way I've lived in my life has been, and obviously a lot of our journey becomes this expression of the way we've been brought up and all of that kind of great stuff. That the unconditioned self for me was this exploration of imagine if I could have chosen what I wanted versus being conditioned to believe something because someone told me to, especially when we understand that the reason why that person believed it is because the person before them taught them that. So it just kind of shifted my reality a little bit to kind of realize that I was living in this kind of really confined space of labels and conditioning, and I had to break free. I couldn't for the life of me, because what would happen is then I would come across any human that I would come across, and I would think, well, what do they need from me? Because obviously we need to be conditioned to be loved and accepted by all these people. It's just this it was a pervasive sort of continuation of a trauma that I'd experienced when I was younger, that I just thought, I just need to get out of this. So I find it still happening to me when people sort of ask me things I kind of don't know how to answer, even to the point where, I kind of have hobbies and skills and all these kind of things. And I think, oh God, I'm a musician. I can sing. I love to write poetry. I kind of, I like this today, I like that tomorrow. And I think it's important that those things can, I have them as the things that seem to come naturally to me, including kind of this journey where I can sort of support people in their kind of awakening to who they really are, which is whatever they want to be. And I
Mm.
just feel like there's this room for us to expand, and that expansion is what I was craving, from not realizing just how like overshadowed I was by everything I thought I had to be for everyone else. So yeah, I
Mm.
think that it's a really, I became quite passionate about it, realizing just how hard it was to hold all of these conditions in. And then from there, it just, I think, and it's interesting actually. I'm kind of trying to work out where this feeling is in my head or my body, because I'm noticing that as I'm trying to explain it, it's almost hard to explain, because it's mixed in with all of these beautiful teachings and learnings, but also just this, what do people need, what do people expect, what do people want to have from me, and what do I need to be for other people. And I think that happens in the coaching, in sessions, it happens in relationships, in friendships, in family relationships. And it can be hard to kind of decipher your own energy in front of other
Mm-hmm.
people. And I think because that became so hard for me, and I was just this puppet to everyone's desires and everyone's expectations, I actually didn't even know what I wanted. I was so confused by even my own ability to work out my own state, that I almost had to kind of like go, la 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 la, like, whoa, like, can everyone just leave me alone for a minute so I can work out what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And I went on that journey, and I think that made me really passionate about supporting people to just, not even to just, because that sounded a bit sort of flippant, but to really honor their own truth. But how do you know what that is? That to me is the unconditioned self. It's the ability to strip back what you've decided was important for you to stay loved and safe and all that kind of stuff, and work out if it's really still true for you. Because I think a lot of the time we kind of we grow up and become teenagers and adults, and then we're like, oh, I don't actually wish that I wasn't like this, or I wish that I could choose something different, or all those kind of things, and we don't actually know how to choose it, something different, because we're so used to feeling pressured by those expectations. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I really vibe with what you just said, because I feel like we are humans that live here and now, and there is no past, there is no future. So the reality is that what is true for us is here and now, and how we express ourselves in the moment. So if we labeled ourselves yesterday, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same as we label ourselves today. So I completely get why it could be hard to label or to identify anything about yourself, because if in 5 minutes you're going to change your mind and you're not going to be that person anymore, then what? Like, who are you then? Are you this identity, or are you something bigger? Are you just consciousness shaping itself in all these different moments of your life, which you don't really need to define? I mean, it helps us sometimes to define so that we can relate to things. And as humans, we have minds, so it's good to sometimes, organize things in our mind, and that's good. Logic is very necessary, but I completely get this perspective where you are a different person every single split second of your life, right? Because in a split second, you can change your mind about something, or you can get a new perspective or new insight or new feeling or whatever else there is, because there's always more to life. So yeah, just closing yourself in a specific identity, I also dislike it, especially, for example, when I say to people that I'm vegan. I really love eating vegan, and this is the most healthy thing for me to do. But if I don't know, have birthday cake that my grandma made that reminds me of my childhood, and I want to have a tiny piece, and it's with eggs or something, then am I still vegan or not? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's hard to define then, because at which point you stop becoming something, a label, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, like, I am vegan in my view, and the fact that I would eat once per, I don't know, half a year or 3 months or whatever something non-vegan doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not that, or maybe I'm just none of it. But it's just so hard to label, and it's only one example, right? It could be about anything: being a musician, being a healer, being a whatever. So I totally agree. with this perspective that you can be whoever you are in the specific moment, and there is no need to defining ourselves if we don't need people to know more or less where we are at. And so we were talking about or you were talking about this feeling of like you need to be there for someone else, like you need to please everyone pretty much. And so what would you say for all these people pleasers? Because I've been there too. I've been submissive to other people's opinions. I've been thinking about other people more than I thought about myself. And what would you say that is the tip for you from you to all these people who are still struggling with people pleasing? Like, what would be your number one or maybe top 3 tips?
Oh gosh. Okay. So people pleasing, first thing, and you and I know this very well from the inner work we do on a friggin' minute by minute basis, is that people pleasing serves an incredible purpose. And I feel like that's the most important thing to start with, is that it has a reason for being the way that it is. So people pleasing serves us because it allows us to feel loved and accepted. And if we struggle with that and we don't know what we want, then to please the other person is almost the easier way to do it. It almost guarantees us the love and acceptance we want. So I think that's the first thing, to always be open to accepting that these things that we kind of deem can be negative for us just have a beautiful reason for existing in the first place. And you'll often find that you were modeled that particular behavior, or you needed that particular strategy to please your parents or your siblings or anything that you were kind of growing up with. So there's nothing wrong with it, is the first thing. The second thing is and maybe it's the next phase of it, is that the reason that people pleasing can become something that's negative is because you're actually not serving your own best interests when you're people pleasing all the time. So sometimes it might serve you, but oftentimes if you're compromising your own inner truth, it doesn't serve you. And that's what's the most important thing to notice about how and why we people please. And I think that the step to take in that is to, it is hard to do if you're a people pleaser and it's a pervasive thing. So all you do is you realize you're doing it. I think the awareness is the most important thing. So what you do is you'll notice it everywhere. All of a sudden you'll be like, oh my God, I didn't realize that I'm so people. And then you kind of get into this like, oh gosh, I'm really compromising my own inner truth, and that can't be fair. And so you can see this movement from the awareness of it, from the understanding where it came from, and then you all of a sudden feel like, oh, okay, I need to do something about this. And I think it needs to happen in those stages so that you can get the benefit of feeling the compassion for yourself, so that then you can transform that self into okay, I'm going to seek out, how do I change this? And I think then you can actually do the inner work. So if it doesn't happen in that succession, all we do is we go, well, I'm not going to people please, or I shouldn't do it, or this person's being selfish and I should just get what I want. I think it needs to be massaged in. It almost needs to be like considered from that place of knowing where it comes from, and then realizing how much it happens, feeling compassion. And then from that place, the tools become the unconditioning part. So working out why you felt like that was what you needed to do in the first place. And then from there, it's really important, and what I've learnt a lot over the past however many years we've been in this kind of developmental stage of unconditioning all this stuff, is that we need to be really kind to ourselves as we're unconditioning, and the people who we uncondition with, so the people who we choose to practice these new things with, need to be safe people, because it can be detrimental if we start to choose to do these behaviors with people, or these new behaviors with people who are not as conscious or aware. So I think those sort of 3 things really help to make sure that the way you uncondition, or the way you bring yourself into your true authentic self, sticks. Because the awareness is so important, the compassion is so important, and then the ability for you to have someone else compassionately work with you, even to know that you're like that, so that they can call you out on it and your best interest and say you're probably people pleasing me, or that's, you know, there's ways that we can actually use the relationships we're in to help support us through all that. So I think that's probably the best thing I can think of and what's really worked for me in that journey, because that's definitely what I've worked through in people pleasing, and I still work on it daily.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. It was really, it's spot on, I would say. For me, I can really see the reflection of me and my journey in what you just said. And it's so important, as you said, to have people around you and express to them like, hey, I actually realized that I have this pattern of people pleasing. So if I do that, maybe you can also give me a hint, because if you have friends who are heart-based friends, they can actually even help you see that when you do it. And they can ask you like, are you sure you want to do this for me? Because I kind of have a feeling that you might not want to do it and just sacrifice for me, which is not good for anyone, right? Because if you sacrifice yourself for someone, then unconsciously, subconsciously, you build resentment and sometimes frustration or anger even towards this person, because you actually don't want to do this thing, but you are doing it because part of you thinks that it's the best thing to do. But then another part of you is like, fuck that, I don't even want to do this, right? I want to do something else. And then it's actually like resistance within yourself and towards this person. So it actually doesn't make any sense to sacrifice yourself for others and to people please, because it's just resulting in more and more resistance inside of you, and probably between you and this person that you're pleasing as well. So it's just, very unhealthy to do that. But as you said, the first step is awareness. And so if we can come to this understanding and see how we are dealing with it, then it can become our gift. Because I can see that for me, I was a people pleaser, but that gave me the opportunity and the skill to talk to people, to be open to them, to be extroverted, to actually be empathetic, to care about people a lot, right? And so some people are not like that, and they have different gifts and different unique talents. But for me, I used my, let's say, my inner people pleaser, right, for good. So now, instead of sacrificing myself, I would just use the beautiful qualities of this pleaser inside of me to tune into other people's needs, to be extroverted and talk to people, to run this podcast even as well, because, it's also for people to get some value, to have a beautiful conversation, to, get something out of it that we're doing here. So as you said, we can always use this awareness and use these parts of us in healthy ways for our good, not creating resistance, but actually create beautiful changes for us and for the world. And so, thank you so much for sharing that, because it's really important for people to also know that it's not like they need to fix themselves, right? It's just realizing, bringing awareness, and then just using these beautiful qualities that we can use for our own good. I saw that fly. So funny.
I was going to add one thing to that because I think it's really important when we're dealing with something that we feel like maybe a relative weakness that we have. So, for example, people pleasing kind of puts us on a tier. It kind of, people see it as like you're kind of not, you don't have great boundaries, you're kind of not assertive. There's a few things that kind of come with it. I think it's really important to realize that in your dealing with these kind of things, it's not a one-sided thing. So the person that you have in the relationship that you're doing this process with, or the people that you start to be less people-pleasing with, will actually be served as well. So it's always a two-way relationship. It's always in relationship that we're going to heal these things, and know that it's not that you are in a position where you're weaker or you're not as important or there's something wrong with you, because some people may have it may have served them for you to people please with them. So the person that's on the other receiving side of the people pleasing, if you suddenly stop people pleasing, it'd be interesting to see how they respond as well. And so it can actually be in the benefit and the highest good of the other person that you're doing this with, or you've realized it with, to support them through their own journey, which may be that, whatever is on the other side of that. And there can be so many different things. But it's just, I love having realized that it's not, we are not isolated on our journey for self-development. It is really that we are doing this with people and that it's all serving all of us. We're all in community with each other, just working through our stuff, bumping into each other, going, okay, let's work through that. You know, it's all just one big kind of way to grow ourselves and expand. And I think that's beautiful. And when we can accept that everyone's expanding, then it just becomes that we're all doing this together. And like me and you, you know, catching up again and kind of having this great conversation, it's going to grow us even more. And I think that's just so important to know.
Yeah. And this is great what you said, because even if we trigger the shit out of the other person when we stop pleasing them, it means that they need to go through this internal journey of like, okay, this person is not pleasing me anymore. Like, what do I do right now? And then we can really discover, and they can discover who they are without this pleasing system, let's say, or this, program that we've had before. And also what you said before, like, that people pleaser might be considered as not assertive or whatever. I believe that in every people pleaser, there is a part of them that actually doesn't even want to please anyone, right? So it's not like we are only one. We are just non-assertive, because I can see in myself, because I was submissive and loyal, my Enneagram type, personality type is loyalist. So always sticking to the rules, always, doing what mommy says and things like that. But then there is another part of me that is a total rebel. And it's not going to do what any authority tells her, right? And so there are two parts of me. One is very submissive and one is the opposite. And so if I integrate them both, I can choose whenever I express this or that part. And so we don't really, we're not only one part. We are associating with one part, maybe because of the experiences and forming of the personality, but we always have this other side within us. So if we explore it, for example, through parts work or other methods, right, then we can realize that it's, again, we don't have to label ourselves as a people pleaser or as non-assertive or whatever else, because there is always this other polarized side to us that is maybe hidden in our subconscious, but we can always bring it up and then integrate and see how we go from there and who we are, how we express ourselves when we have them both.
Yes, very, very well said. And that is the epitome of why labeling is such a is almost it doesn't even matter. Right. And you'll notice if you start this journey, into shadow work or parts work or all this kind of stuff, you'll realize that you are all of them. That's the point, is to love and accept and be non-judgmental towards all parts, whether we perceive it as good or bad or light or dark. It doesn't matter. They all have to exist and coexist for them to even be a thing. And I know that might sound very esoteric, and that's obviously the whole podcast in itself, but, the polarity of each particular type of people pleasing or not, and just knowing that we're on a continuum of a journey where you start this and you realize one aspect about yourself, and then we deal with that, and then another one comes, and that's okay, and we deal with that. And it's just that's where my heart is, in just being so open and so loving and compassionate. And it's because I've been that for myself. This wasn't my reality previously. I thought all of me was darkness. I thought all of me was shameful, whether it was good or bad. It was such a dark world to live in. To have shone the light on darkness and be so loving towards it is like, I realize how far I've come. Like, now I'm like, oh wow, like, that's a big deal, because it's really hard, especially when you've been conditioned to believe that part of you is horrible. And so it's just so important to be able to have the freedom to just explore without judgment, without needing to go, I am this, I am that. Sometimes even personality traits and psychology and language and all that the mental health system is diagnosing people left, right and center to put them in boxes so they can control the elements of this abnormal behavior. To me, it's just all irrelevant. There's this beautiful way that life works. And if we're able to kind of strip back all this stuff, all of the noise, all of the shit that's kind of kept going and going and going, and layer upon layer, and then we're here and we're like, when did this happen? Oh my gosh, how have I get it out of me. And so we've got to go through that, and it takes a minute. It takes a freaking minute. and I think that's so, we're seeking out people who will go on that journey with us, including, whether it's a coach or, a practitioner, whatever it is, or it's friends or family or people who are conscious. It's really important to have people like that around us. And I think that's the journey. This is life.
Yes, absolutely. I really resonate with what you shared. And on this journey, when we are discovering who we are, it's actually quite difficult sometimes to find your authentic self. And I would love to talk about authenticity with you, because I know that in your life it was a big theme of discovering who you are and authentically expressing yourself to the world. And I remember the first time we met, you were sharing a little bit about this story, and I would love for all the listeners to hear about the story of your authentic expression as well, because I know that it was big in your life. And so if you're happy to share, we would love to hear how you came to your authentic self-expression and stripped away all these conditioning up to this point, because obviously there is always more to strip away, but up to this point, how did your journey with authenticity begin and developed until now?
Let me think of the catalyst, because I think that's important. I think the main catalyst for me was kind of waking up, realizing that I didn't feel like I was living. Like I was like, I wonder what it's like to not be here, because I don't feel like I'm here. So if I was dead, well, we're just talking about like the reality of if I wasn't here, would it feel any different than if I am here? And then what's the point in living? And there was just this kind of catalytic moment where I kind of, it was a bit nonchalant like that. I was like, oh, I don't really feel like it was like I was non-existent, and I'd lost myself. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what the hell I was to think. I would need everyone to give me permission for everything. And it was such an exhausting existence. And because of the way that I was wired and conditioned, I thought everyone's best interest was what I had to submit to. And so I became very good at reading people. I became like, it was my survival strategy. I became like super like conditioned to just know everything about movements. It's probably why I have this kind of hypersensitive gift almost with human behavior and human, everything that's expressed, because I've studied it for my own survival. And, when you can channel that into a gift, it's great, but it also came from a lot of pain. So when I had that moment, I really, I was like, I'll give myself one more shot, because I'd done a lot of work. This was back in 2019. It wasn't that long ago. In terms of that moment, I'd done a lot of work beforehand, just nothing was sticking. And I just sort of was like, I'll give it a try. So I did, I went on a journey, and I kind of went down the psychology route again, had some sessions and did therapies. And then all of a sudden sort of came across ayahuasca randomly, came across Teal Swan, which obviously we both know, and came across shadow work. And I feel like shadow work for me really catalyzed something in terms of my ability to be able to hold space for the polarity of two different things, to have love and hate happen at it. My brain wasn't even able to conceptualize how I could be loved for one and the other. I didn't understand. And yet, to gain wholeness and authentic truth, there has to be the ability to look both in the face and say, you're okay just as you are. If I get angry, it's because I'm putting defenses up that are protecting myself. And if I get angry and it's over the top and all that, I can pull myself back and be humble and realize that. Like there's all these different beautiful ways to see shame, guilt, like me not existing because I was so ashamed of who I was. Like it was like every time I expressed myself, it wasn't right. So I think it came from a lot of pain that I needed to make this change. And I don't actually know. I had someone recently ask me how on earth I've gotten through a lot of the things I've gotten through. And I didn't know how to answer the question, because I thought to myself, gosh, I don't know what part of me is cheering me on, but there's a part of me that's like, you can do it. It's going to be okay. So obviously, there's a resilience in me that found enough room to trust, even though I was like, I have no idea what's happening. And it took daily and moment by moment conscious sitting with those feelings, with those emotions, with the relationships that I could just see. It was like the awareness of me not being here and existing. It meant I had to be brave enough to put a part of me out and know that it was probably going to be rejected from my conditioning. So I believed it was going to be rejected, but it took everything within me to be brave enough to show it and then see what happens, instead of just abiding by everyone else's stuff. So I think there was a lot of catalyst moments after that moment where I was like, I'll give it another shot. And I tell you what, it didn't stop from the one shot wasn't what it was. It was like a million shots. Like I was like, what did I even ask for when I said I'm going to give this one more shot, this life thing that I pretty much had given up on. And I was like, I don't exist. I don't know how I exist now. Like I actually exist in the world, and I feel like I make an imprint, and I have something that actually leaves an energetic imprint with people. And I've always had that. Just because I didn't know myself or didn't want to express myself anymore doesn't mean that it wasn't there and happening. What's the difference between consciously doing that rather than just it coming out in bits and people go, oh, there she is. But it didn't happen very often back then, whereas people are like, oh, there she is, and she's there again, and there she is. And it's just me going, I'm here again, and this is another part of me. And being brave enough and knowing and seeing the reflection enough times for acceptance of those parts that I was ashamed of, that goes, oh, I'm safe. That part's safe. That part's safe. And when it wasn't quite safe, it would just be re-exploring and then going, oh, there it is again. And what I've noticed is that if we look at this as our higher selves become the parent to reparent the part of us that didn't get that when we were younger, it may have been the freaking mother in me, that kind of went, I got you, and part of my trauma is that my mum died when I was 7 months old. So, there's a big, and I didn't have the best model of parenting when I was growing up. So for me, it's a testament to my own trauma and my own, very distorted conditioning of what it was to self-soothe, to self-regulate, to love myself, to all those things when there was a lot of other people's interests that were more important than mine. So I had to do a lot of really deep work that brought up a lot of, anyone who's been gaslit before, it's a very torturous journey to find yourself, because you actually don't believe almost what you're saying to yourself. You have to how do you know your truth? Because someone's sort of distorted it so many times that you're like, I'm done. I don't even know what the truth is. So, it's hard. I suppose the answer to it is hard to kind of make it all short and sweet. But for me, it was maybe it was just that I chose it. I chose that. I made that statement that day when I kind of woke up and was like, this is not living. And what happened from there was just an epic adventure. And I haven't even really shared what the adventure was, but sort of as to giving kind of lessons learned, that's kind of how, if you've got any questions, you can kind of pinpoint things, but I could talk about it forever.
I have plenty, but first I would love to explain to all the listeners what gaslighting is. If anyone doesn't know, it's when someone is covering the truth. So, for example, something happened, and then someone, for example, came to your room during the night, and then they will tell you that there was no one there and they never came, right? That would be gaslighting, when they just telling you that what you saw, what you experienced, what you felt is not true, whereas it was. And this creates this whole problem in your subconscious mind, because then, for example, if it happens as a kid and you have a parent or caregiver or whoever else, teacher or friend, who is gaslighting you, you start doubting your own self, your own intuition, you stop trusting yourself, you lose confidence, and you really stop believing in your own feelings, right? And in your own truth. So it's actually quite a harmful mechanism that sometimes people do unconsciously, right? Because sometimes, for example, parents wouldn't say something to a kid just because they want to protect them from knowing something, right? Because, okay, if parents break up, maybe a parent will say, oh no, we are okay, but we just need to this dad just went on holidays, or dad just whatever, but it's not true. And then the kid feels it, and then it's like, okay, so I feel that it's not true, but this authority tells me that this is true. So where is the truth actually? And this could be very mild, but this could be very, very hardcore as well, right? When, for example, someone would be sexually abused as a child, and then, let's say it was an uncle and the niece, and the uncle would say that it never happened, and then the kid would have a trauma, but then the whole family would say that the kid is just imagining it, right? So it could be light, but it could be quite deep as well. So I just wanted to clarify for all these people who don't know maybe this term, because gaslighting, I don't know if it's like a common term used for that, but it's quite a challenging journey to get out of it once you have these programs in your mind. But thanks to shadow work and things like completion process that we both practice, this coming to childhood traumas and reprogramming them, or parts work, these things can really help to get to this confidence and get to this belief in yourself and in your own truth, and trusting your intuition as well, because it's all interrelated to each other. And we were talking about this authentic journey, when sometimes you need to let go of some people as well, right? When they don't, for example, mirror what you want to express in life, or they don't mirror yourself, that because you want to be also seen and heard and accepted by who you are. And if some people cannot do it, there's two things to that. One thing is that there is a part of you that maybe doesn't accept, because these people are a reflection of you, right? So that maybe these people are just showing you the part that is there and is not accepting yourself. But also to create boundaries with people and be like, okay, I don't want to be in this kind of energy with this person. I want to be more authentic. I want to express more love, and this person is quite closed off to me. And we've been just talking about it before we started the podcast, and I want to talk about it again, because it's so important that we realize our authentic truth and realize what boundaries we have with relationships that we have. And so the question from me to you is, for people who find it really hard to let relationships go, friendships, or even family members sometimes, right? Because it could be about family too. What would you say would be the best advice for them if they're really attached to these people, if they maybe feel lonely, and this loneliness is just making them stick to the people that are not actually the best match for them?
So the important thing here is that again, we come back to the awareness of what is going on. So to be really self-aware in this is the most important thing, because it is hard. It is really hard to hold boundaries in places where you've got the trauma and you've held that person, or that shift in that person's behavior is causing you to want to stop the relationship. Will trigger things in you, and to hold your own sort of certainty about what you're feeling about the relationship ending, you kind of need to have that sort of stability so that you can hold that little kid who's scared of losing the person just as much, right? So there may be toxicity, there may be all these things that we want to let go of, but there's still little kids in us that are like, oh, but we want, like the people please, but we can't let them go. Or we might be really loyal, so we're like, oh no, I'm supposed to be loyal, I can't give up my loyalty, and yet the person's hurting us. So there is some work to be done before we choose these things that can be quite harsh on our systems if we do them prematurely. And I know that because I've tried to do it prematurely, and it has caused more stress on my system post the situation of letting it go. Now, sometimes it is abuse that needs to be shut down. So that's okay. So that you can deal with it on the other side of it, and you're not supposed to deal with it with the person. But if you're consciously choosing out of relationships because you know that they aren't in your best interest, my first piece of advice is to really make sure that you're tending to the parts of you that might contradict the decision. And you'll notice it because it'll
Mm-hmm.
feel uncomfortable. You'll feel anxious about it, you know, and that's okay. So so from there, there's this place that you can come to where it serves you and the person to do this. So like when I was saying before about, we know that we're in relationships doing this with the other person, just because you know, it actually serves someone else, even if they're the kind of abuser or if they're the one that's actually causing the toxicity. It serves them for their expansion to have people come into their lives and show them parts of themselves that might be hurting someone else. And it's okay that it might feel right for them, that they might be like, oh, I'm fine with the way I'm acting. And it could be conditioning from their own childhood that they're certain that they are okay with it. And that doesn't discount how you feel. So we have to be able to take all these things into consideration, because if you've come to the conclusion where you're going to self-love yourself enough to choose out of a relationship that's hurting you, then the integration will be full, will actually be complete, so you don't have to relearn the lesson if you're doing these things, like really taking care of the parts of you that don't want to do it, and being there for the parts of you that care about the other person. Especially, a lot of these decisions aren't really made in isolation of like hating the other person. You know, often there's actually the attachments there. So I feel like it's important for your own system to feel centered about it. It doesn't need to be fully centered, because I think it'll always feel a little bit weird to be like, I can't have you in my life. But it's self-loving to do it. It's self-loving to do it with certainty as well, and with like a closed chapter, a closed feeling. So you'll notice if you're trying to find excuses to leave the door slightly open, it can be a way that you can still be leaving the energy there so that you can't move on and find people that will be in alignment with what you're wanting. And we often go into this hyper kind of survival mode where we think that if we're going to let that person go, that we don't find anyone else, because we'll use all the excuses that make that person a great person in some ways, and then we'll go back and we'll go, oh no, but they're being really hard on us. And it's actually really brave when we're talking about this. It's brave to make these decisions, because sometimes it might not make sense to the other person, and that has to be okay. And that's what, when I've been on this journey of unconditioning, it has to be okay that your boundaries are important, even though they don't make sense to everyone else. Because if you think about it, especially if you're in this position, it's often that you'll put your needs as a lesser than the other person. Whereas if that person decided you weren't the great person in their lives, they could make that decision and they could cut you out, and you're left feeling, you know, that way. It's got to go both ways. So know that you deserve boundaries and deserve these kind of things in your life just as much as anyone else can also make the decision about you. And it's okay, because we may be in each other's life for a season, a reason, or, you know, a lifetime. And it's okay that these people come and go, but it's so important because to be able to address those parts that are scared. And that's the key. It really is. And then making the decision to be with yourself after, and maybe even find other people to help you make the decision so that they can keep you accountable to some of those really strong feelings you have. They're just some of the things that will help.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing. And to this, I would like to add that sometimes when you actually decide to let go of a friendship and you explain to people that you're, you know, breaking up with why you do this, they can also have like a wake-up call in a way to change something in their life. And it doesn't always mean that you're gonna let this go forever. It might, but it doesn't necessarily mean, because if they are also happy to see, oh, actually maybe I did act like this or that, and maybe they can shift something in themselves. But before you let it all go and you're completely detached from having this relationship, it cannot shift before that. Because if you completely let go, if you stop wanting this relationship to work and you just let the universe do its thing, right, then it might happen that you're going to have a better relationship with this person than ever, because they might realize something. They might come to the understanding, wow, I actually valued this friendship or this relationship and now I don't have it. What could I shift within myself to be able to communicate better with this person, or be able to sustain this friendship better, or whatever else is there. And for some people, it's actually so important to know that, and for you to express your authentic truth, so that they can be like, okay, they can assess their behavior, their actions. And I've had conversations with people like that, when they were like, oh, actually, yeah, I didn't really take you into account as much as you asked me to, or as you needed, and now I see it, and now I can actually take more steps in my life to care more about other person, or to be less selfish in my decisions, or whatever else is there. So it's actually important to speak your truth, because it can change the other person. It can inspire them to change, rather, not change them because they need to change themselves, but it can really be inspiring for someone to be like, oh, I really value this person, and she doesn't want to, or he doesn't want to be friends with me anymore. Why? Maybe there is something that I need to look at. And so it could be really, really valuable to let it go and to see what happens then. And when you surrender to whatever happens, and when you're not attached to anyone or anything, then more and more magic can come to your life. And I can really see it on myself working well. And I had this, I've gone through a breakup recently, and I had this feeling like, actually, every experience that I've created in my life was my experience. This one is so annoying. Every experience is my experience. Like, there was always me in my life, in each experience of my life. So I can always create new experiences with new people. And I felt happy in my life around many people, different people, that sometimes I didn't even know them 1 or 3 years or 10 years before. But then when I was in the moment spending time with these new people in my life, I felt mega happy. And so I can always recreate happiness within myself, no matter what the conditions of my life are, no matter what people around me there are. And of course, it's great to uplift each other and to even amplify this happiness with other people. I love it, right? I love people. I could be with people every single day with some little breaks for myself. But I feel like it's important to really realize that it's your life and you're living it, and you can be happy without conditions. And we're coming back to unconditional self again.
Well done, full circle.
The whole theme of unconditioning. Yeah, that's perfect. And so for the last question, do you have anything that you feel like you really would like to share to the world about this theme of like authenticity and expressing yourself and just really being who you are in this world? Do you have anything that really your heart desires to share with all the listeners, that you feel like it's really a valuable thing to share, valuable perspective?
Okay. What comes to me? I feel like there is something to be said about life showing up exactly what you need when you need it in all areas. It is so not exclusively about I'm on the journey of self-development and I'm doing this work. And what you get to notice is that when we say this is life, it is literally life. When I walk outside my door in the morning and I go out and I experience the world, I'm going to experience reflections of myself, my stuff, my loves, my hate, all the things. I'm going to experience versions of them. And I then get the opportunity to see those versions and choose how I want to be, which is why labels don't work for me, because I want to be able to see what version comes out to want to be expressed. And because we are the accumulation of all things in one physical being, right? And our journey is to enlighten us to realize that all of it is acceptable and loved, and we are whole as we are, no matter what expression happens. It's a beautiful thing to come to a place where you can walk out the door and know that life is unfolding in your best interest, and that whatever shows up at the time it shows up is the perfect timing for you to show up for that part of you. There's no need to dig and to try and find places to get it out and try and work through it. Life does that perfectly for you. You meet someone in the grocery store and you're like, wow, this person like kind of just randomly like whizzed into my life and now they're a friend, or you meet someone, on a bus, or anything can happen. Or you get into an argument with someone randomly and you're like, where did that come from? because life is just showing you exactly what you need when it happens. And so, in the work that I do with any client or anything, we might be knowing that we're going to deal with trauma, or we might be knowing we're going to go back to some kind of childhood thing to work through things. But I never worry about what it is or when or how to bring it up, because you're intelligent enough as a human being, just like I am, to go, I'm done here, let's do something else, or let's have a new experience. And I love being able to know that about life, because then you can trust it and let it hold you, the kind of universe, let it hold the fact that it is perfectly going to show up for you. And what my greatest desire is to teach you how to trust that that's what's going to happen. And only reason I can preach anything to do with this is because I'm living and breathing proof that I was nowhere and now I'm somewhere, right? I didn't exist as my authentic truth. I just existed as a version and as a piece of every single person I encountered, which is perfectly going to create a conglomeration in me of just a lot of stuff. But I didn't have preference. I didn't have, it was all just one big mess. And what I've done is sort of gone, it's all a mess, but I wonder if I can find some kind of way to be with all the parts as they show up, when they do, and be okay with it. And that's what makes me feel the most peace as I live every day, knowing that there's nowhere I have to be, just here. And life will show up if I need it to show up in a way that's in my best and highest good. And from there, I'll just keep doing life. I'll just keep waking up and doing the life that shows up for my best interest. And it's not all bad. I know that's a big thing for me to say, because it all used to feel quite bad. But it's not. It's really not. And I think it's important to know how to see life in this way, because it's hard. And we're all going through a lot at the moment. We've been through a lot, and we went through a lot as kids. That we're not all. You wouldn't be listening to this if there wasn't a seeking in you to want to expand. And these are just like some of the tools. Like, you've got like nothing. Like, this is like really such a small portion of tools that we're wanting to express, but there's just so much that we've got within us to share with each other. And I think it's living.
Wow, this was a beautiful cherry on top of the cake of our conversation. Beautiful share. Thank you so much, and it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I would love to talk about any other thing for hours. I could talk to you for hours, but for now we're gonna end it on in this moment. And thank you so much for agreeing to be on this podcast. It was such a beautiful energy that you share with us, and beautiful wisdom and experience. And I'm sure that you inspired a lot of listeners to be themselves and to be authentic and to show up every day for life. Just for living. So thank you so much, beautiful sister. I'm sending you so much love, and I hope that we're gonna have a chance to talk again.
Thanks for having me. I've loved it every second.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much for being with us today. I just want to mention that you can find Chelsea on Instagram. It's chelsea.jane, but Chelsea with double C and Jane with double E at the end. If you see the Unfiltered Expressionist or Instagram, you're gonna find her. We're gonna find her. Hell, that's funny. No, her. It's more like heaven than hell. And if you would like to find me as well, I am The Connection Catalyst on Instagram. So if you need some support in shadow work or working on your traumas, or if you need to express yourself authentically and you don't know where to start, reach out to me or Chelsea, and I'm sure that we're going to be able to help you. So thank you so much again for listening to us, and see you next time.